All right, so ready to dive into the mind of Beth Harmon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We're going to do a deep dive into her psychology, specifically how she embodies this fascinating personality type, the self-preservation 3.
Sounds intriguing.
You might be thinking, wait, isn't she all about that intellectual 5 energy?
Yeah, on the surface, totally.
But trust me, there's a deeper layer here. It's going to blow your mind.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So what's the deal with this self-preservation 3 thing? It's more than just wanting to win, right?
Right, exactly. The self-preservation 3, you see, they take those core 3 motivations like the drive to succeed, the need for, admiration, and filter it all through this lens of security, survival even. It's about achieving mastery, not just for the accolades, but because, well, their entire sense of worth is tied to it.
So for Beth, losing a chess match isn't just a setback.
Oh, no. For her, it's like a threat to her very existence.
Wow, that's intense. Every time she sits down at the board, it's like her whole identity is on the line.
You got it. And that's why we see her pouring so much of herself into chess, merging her thoughts and actions. It's incredible.
She becomes the game.
Exactly. Competence is everything for a self-preservation 3. They don't just think about the game, they become the game. There's no gap, between knowing and doing. It's all one seamless flow.
That explains why she gets so impatient with people who don't pick up chess as quickly. It's not just competition. It's like she can't fathom why anyone wouldn't be as obsessed with it as she is.
You hit the nail on the head. Remember that scene where she tries teaching the girls at the orphanage?
Yeah.
Her frustration, it's not malicious. It's rooted in her 3 drive. Mastering chess is so fundamental to who she is. She just can't grasp why others wouldn't approach it with the same single-mindedness, the same intensity.
Don't waste time on moves I've already conquered, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay, but here's something that I find really interesting. Her perfectionism, it isn't about like moral righteousness or anything like that.
I see what you mean.
It's purely about being the best, executing flawlessly on that chessboard.
That's a crucial distinction. Other Enneagram types, like the 1, they might focus on perfection as a moral imperative. But for the 3, it's all about competence. They're driven to be the most effective, the most skilled, the absolute best at what they do.
So it's like this internal engine always pushing them to surpass even their own achievements.
Exactly. And that's so evident in Beth's journey. She's never content with just winning a tournament. She's always striving for that next level of mastery.
Always pushing, always striving.
Right. It's like this inner fire that never seems to dim.
So it's not just about being good at chess. It's about applying that 3 mentality to everything she does.
Precisely. Her appearance, her social interactions, everything.
It's all about presenting this image of effortless success, of having it all together.
Exactly. Which, as you can imagine, can take a toll, especially when it comes to processing emotions.
Right, because she really struggles with expressing her feelings, It's like she pushes them down, bottles them up, or just explodes in anger.
That's a common pattern for the self-preservation 3. Emotions, they can feel so messy, so unpredictable. It threatens their carefully constructed world of order and control.
Makes sense.
So they develop coping mechanisms, ways to manage those feelings, suppressing them, turning to anger to regain control. Some even turn to substances to just numb out the intensity.
So chess becomes her sanctuary, her way of creating order, not just on the board, but in her whole life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Remember, order is essential for the self-preservation 3, essential to their mission of self-perfection. And for Beth, chess becomes the ultimate tool for achieving that order. Rules are clear, objective is defined. She's in complete control of her moves.
It's like the chessboard becomes this metaphor for her entire existence, her way of imposing structure on a world that can feel chaotic and unpredictable.
That's a brilliant insight. And it helps us understand why she invests so much of herself in the game. It's not just the competition or even the intellectual challenge. It's about creating a sense of stability, of control, in a life that's often felt anything but.
So her relentless drive, her need to win at all costs, it's all tied back to this deeper need for security and self-preservation.
Precisely. And this brings us to a crucial point. The self-preservation 3's relentless self-demand, it can push them to extremes. They're constantly striving, pushing themselves harder and harder to maintain that sense of control and validation.
And that takes a toll, right? I mean, the text hints at how this constant pressure to be perfect, to never show weakness, it can lead to her isolating herself from others.
Yes, and this is where we see the potential downside of the 3's drives. This constant need to be perfect, to never show weakness, it can lead to a disconnect, a disconnect from their own emotions, from other people, and even from themselves.
So the chessboard, it becomes this complex symbol for Beth. Her battleground, her quest for perfection, her shield against emotional chaos.
And ultimately, her path to feeling secure.
Exactly.
That's a brilliant observation. It highlights the paradox at the heart of the self-preservation three.
Oh, so.
They try to avoid vulnerability by striving for perfection. But ultimately, true mastery requires them to confront that vulnerability head-on.
Which is exactly what we see happening with Beth throughout the series.
Right.
She starts off so guarded, so focused on winning at all costs. But as she faces setbacks, challenges, she's forced to confront her own limitations, her own humanity.
Exactly.
And that's where the real growth begins.
Her journey embodies that classic self-preservation three arc. From rigid control to surrender. From the pursuit of perfection to integration. And from isolation to connection.
So as we dig deeper into the text, it'll be fascinating to see how this dynamic plays out, and her relationships, her career, and ultimately in her own self-awareness.
It will be fascinating.
It's fascinating how chess becomes this like multifaceted symbol for Beth. It's not just a game. It's her platform for proving her worth, her sanctuary of order, and even like her defense against emotional vulnerability. But this reminds me of something I've been thinking about lately. This whole idea of striving for perfection as a way to avoid feeling vulnerable. It's like we build up these walls of achievement just to protect ourselves from, the messiness of human emotion.
It's a common struggle for sure, especially in a culture that often equates worth with achievement. I mean, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with the messages telling us we need to be the best, the most productive, the most successful, and all that just to be valued. It's so easy to internalize those messages and then start believing that our imperfections, well, that they make us unworthy of love or acceptance.
Yeah, I totally get that. It's like we're all playing this game of, what is it, keeping up with the Joneses, constantly comparing ourselves to others and feeling like we're falling short. And for someone like Beth with her, self-preservation 3 drive, that pressure must be magnified tenfold.
Absolutely. Remember, for the self-preservation three, their sense of security, their very foundation, it's directly tied to their ability to achieve and maintain a certain image of success.
Hmm.
So any perceived failure, any crack in that facade of perfection, it can feel like a threat to their very foundation.
Which brings us to Beth's relationship with substances. The text mentions her using tranquilizers, alcohol, especially when she's feeling overwhelmed or stressed.
And this ties directly into the three struggle with vulnerability. Substances, they offer that temporary escape from those uncomfortable feelings, a way to numb out the anxiety, the self-doubt, all those things that threaten to disrupt their carefully constructed world.
It's like she's using them to maintain that sense of control, to keep all those messy emotions at bay.
Mm,
But as we see in the series, it's a slippery slope, ultimately leading to more chaos and instability.
precisely. A classic example of how the three's coping mechanisms, while maybe seeming helpful in the short term, can actually end up making their underlying issues even worse. They prevent them from truly dealing with their emotions.
So how does someone like Beth break free from this? How do they learn to embrace vulnerability instead of constantly trying to outrun it?
What's a journey? A journey of self-discovery. And it often involves facing their fears head-on. They have to learn to separate their worth from their achievements, to understand that they are valuable, they are lovable, even when they make mistakes.
Easier said than done.
Right. And that requires a deep level of self-compassion, a willingness to acknowledge their imperfections without, judgment or self-criticism.
That sounds incredibly challenging, especially for someone like Beth, who's so used to pushing herself to be the best, to never show weakness. It's almost like you're asking her to dismantle her entire belief system.
It's definitely not easy, no.
Mm.
It requires a willingness to challenge those deeply ingrained beliefs about worth and value, to confront the fear of what might happen if they let go of that need for control. But the rewards, they're immense. When a self-preservation three learns to embrace their vulnerability, they open themselves up to a whole new level of authenticity, creativity, and connection.
It's like they're finally able to exhale, to release that grip on perfection and just step into a more genuine and fulfilling way of being.
Exactly. And that freedom allows them to tap into a deeper well of wisdom, of creativity that was always there, but just hidden beneath the surface of all that perfectionism. They can finally connect with their true selves, with their passions, their unique gifts, and all without the constant pressure of having to prove themselves.
So we've talked about the self-preservation threes, fear of failure, their need for control, and how those factors contribute to, Beth's struggles with emotional expression, substance use. But there's another piece of the puzzle here, her relationships. The text mentions that she has difficulty forming genuine connections, often pushing people away or keeping them at arm's length.
And this makes total sense when you consider the three's core fears. Intimacy requires vulnerability, right? A willingness to let someone see you, flaws and all. And for someone like Beth, who's built her entire identity around, well, being perfect, that can feel incredibly threatening.
It's like she's afraid that if someone gets too close, they'll discover she's not this, flawless, capable person she projects to the world.
Exactly. And that fear of exposure, of being seen as anything less than perfect, it can lead them to sabotage relationships or create emotional distance. It's all to protect themselves from potential rejection or judgment.
So how does this play out in Beth's specific relationships? The text mentions those complicated relationships with her adoptive mother, her romantic interests, and even her fellow chess players.
Hmm. Let's start with her adoptive mother, Alma. There's this underlying tension between them, wouldn't you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
A sense that Beth is both grateful for Alma's support, but also maybe a little resentful of her perceived weakness.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It's like she admires Alma's free spirit, but also judges her for her dependence on alcohol, her lack of ambition.
And this ties into the three's struggle with integrating their own shadow side. They often project their disowned emotions and vulnerabilities onto others, judging those who display the very traits they're trying to repress within themselves.
So, in a way, Beth's criticism of Alma is actually a reflection of her own internal struggle with insecurity and self-doubt.
Precisely. She's projecting those unwanted aspects of herself onto Alma as a way to maintain her own image of perfection and control.
What about her romantic relationships? The text mentions a few fleeting connections, but nothing that seems to last.
This is a common pattern for threes, especially early on in their development. They might be drawn to partners who admire and validate them, but they struggle with true intimacy. True intimacy requires a willingness to let go of that need for control, to allow themselves to be truly seen.
So they're attracted to the admiration, but terrified of the vulnerability that comes with real connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this can lead to a cycle of short-lived relationships. They might push partners away when things get too close, or choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, mirroring their own inability to fully commit.
It's like they're playing a game of romantic chess, always strategizing, always trying to maintain the upper hand.
That's a great analogy. It highlights the three's tendency to approach relationships from a place of performance rather than genuine connection. They're focused on projecting that certain image, on winning the game, instead of just being themselves and allowing love to just unfold organically.
Okay, so we've covered family dynamics and romantic entanglements. What about her relationships with other chess players? The text describes her as fiercely competitive, often isolating herself to focus on the game.
Makes sense when you consider the threes need to be the best. Competition becomes a validation of their worth, a way to prove their superiority, maintain their sense of self-importance.
So it's not just about loving the game, it's about using chess as a vehicle for recognition, admiration.
Exactly. And this can lead to a sense of isolation, as they prioritize achievement over genuine connection. They might see other players as rivals, threats to their dominance, rather than potential allies, or even friends.
Like they're playing a solo game, even when they're surrounded by others.
Yeah. And that isolation can further reinforce their belief that they have to do it all alone, that they can't rely on others for support or validation.
It's a vicious cycle, isn't it?
It is.
The more they isolate themselves, the more they reinforce that belief that they have to be perfect, self-sufficient to survive.
Exactly. And this brings us to a crucial point. The self-preservation three's pursuit of perfection, it's often a defense mechanism, a way to protect themselves from feeling inadequate, unworthy. But ironically, this very strategy can lead to the very outcomes they're trying to avoid: isolation, emotional disconnect, and a deep sense of loneliness.
So the very thing they're striving for, perfection, success, admiration, it ultimately becomes a barrier to experiencing the things that would bring them true fulfillment, connection, intimacy, a sense of belonging.
That's the paradox of the self-preservation three. Their strength lies in their ability to strive for excellence. But their growth, their real growth, comes from learning to accept that perfection. Well, it's an illusion. And that true happiness, it lies in embracing their imperfections, allowing themselves to be vulnerable.
It's a powerful message, and it resonates so deeply with Beth's journey throughout the series. She starts off so focused on winning, on proving herself, that she loses sight of, like, the joy of the game. It's only when she starts to let go of that rigid control to connect with others on a deeper level that she's able to tap into her true potential, as both a chess player and as a human being.
Exactly. Her story is a reminder that true strength doesn't come from avoiding our imperfections, but from embracing them. It's in those moments of vulnerability that we discover our true potential and connect with the world in a more, in a more authentic and meaningful way.
So as we delve further into the text, it'll be fascinating to see how Beth, navigates these challenges, how she confronts her fears, and ultimately how she learns to integrate her need for achievement with her desire for connection. It's striking, how Beth's journey kind of mirrors that classic hero's journey.
Oh yeah, totally.
Starting off in this isolated world, honing her skills, battling her inner demons,
Hmm.
but it's her willingness to actually confront those demons, step outside of her comfort zone that leads to her greatest victories.
It really does. It reminds me of Joseph Campbell's work on the hero's journey. The idea that, a hero has to venture into the unknown, face those trials and temptations, and ultimately return transformed. And that transformation, it often hinges on, on a moment of surrender, letting go of control, embracing the unknown.
And for Beth,
Mm.
with her need for structure, predictability, that surrender, it must feel terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's in that surrender, that willingness to let go of that need for perfection,
Yeah.
that she's able to access this deeper level of intuition and creativity. Remember that scene, the iconic one, where she's visualizing the chessboard on the ceiling?
Oh, yeah.
That's her subconscious breaking through, guiding her.
Yeah.
It's a wisdom that goes beyond, just logic and strategy.
It's like she finally taps into that flow state, that effortless mastery, that
Yeah.
comes when we kind of let go of the control of our conscious mind, when we allow ourselves to be guided by something, something greater.
Exactly. That's where the magic happens, both in chess and, in
Right.
life. When we release that need to control every single outcome, that's when we open ourselves up to possibilities we could never have imagined. We become more adaptable, more resilient, and ultimately more successful in actually achieving our goals.
So it's like Beth's journey is an invitation for all of us to embrace our own imperfections, to trust our intuition, and to just surrender to the unpredictable flow of life.
It is. It's a call to release that grip on perfectionism and step into, a more authentic, more fulfilling way of being. And it's a reminder, too, that true mastery, whether it's on the chessboard or in life, it doesn't come from avoiding our vulnerabilities, but from embracing them.
Exploring Beth's story through this lens, through the lens of the Self-Preservation 3, has been so insightful, not just about her character, but about the human condition.
It really has. It speaks to the power of the Enneagram, as a tool for self-discovery, for understanding. By exploring these different personality types, we can really gain a deeper appreciation for the many ways people experience the world, how they process emotions, how they build relationships.
And it gives us a language, a way to talk about these complex dynamics, to understand ourselves and others with more compassion, more empathy.
Absolutely. And that deeper understanding, it can lead to more fulfilling relationships, more meaningful work, a greater sense of purpose.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Beth's world, what final thought would you leave with our listener?
I'd encourage them to reflect on their own relationship with perfectionism.
Hmm.
Where in your life do you strive for flawlessness as a way to, to protect yourself from vulnerability? What might happen if you allowed yourself to embrace those vulnerabilities? It might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's in those moments of imperfection, of genuine connection, that we truly come alive.
That's a powerful takeaway. And for our listener out there, remember, this isn't about putting labels on yourself or others. It's about using these insights as a tool for self-awareness, for growth. As you go about your day, pay attention to those moments, where you feel that urge to strive for perfection, to control every outcome, and ask yourself, what might happen if I let go just a little? What new possibilities might emerge if I embraced the messy, the imperfect beauty of being human? You might be surprised at what you discover.